What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're going to be adding another page to our budget wizard form. So on this page, we're going to be actually collecting the budget itself. So we're going to do that in two ways. One, you can either just enter a set budget for your trip. So if you want to just put $300 for your trip, you can do that. The other way, which is a bit more exciting, is if you can break down your budget, and by exciting I mean exciting to, I guess, program out. You can break down your budget into 4 different categories. So it'll actually just be easier to show you what it's going to look like at the end. So let me do that right now. So here in the app, if you are adding your new trip, this is the page we're going to be doing. You can either add a budget here of 200, or you can hit the build budget, and this will toggle you to have these four budget fields. So if you put 400 here, you notice the total is updated automatically. If you put 50, it's updated there as well. And then if you change your mind and you want to do the simple budget, we saved that amount there. Then if you continue on, it'll save your total and push it up to Firebase as 450 and pull it back down immediately into the app. So all of that looks great. We're going to do that right now. Let's get to it. Let's go ahead, and we actually already have the budget view file here in our views new trips. So go ahead and create another new file, and we'll call it, let's see, be a Dart file. Let's just call this the summary for now, the summary view. And go ahead and take everything from the budget view and move it into the summary view. Because if you look in the app right now, when you're going to add a new one, this summary view is just kind of showing us the summary data, but really we're going to build out that budget view in that file. Okay, in the summary view, we just need to change the class name to be the summary view. I guess we'll keep it the new trip summary view. And change this as well. Cool. Then back in the budget view, we can just change where we're routing this to be the we can navigate now to that summary view. So somewhere in the date view, how we're using a material page route, we'll actually just copy this whole navigator push here and move it into this budget view and modify that. And instead of going to the budget view here, we're going to go to the summary view, which also means we have to include the summary view. And the widget here is undefined because this is actually right now just a stateless widget. So we can just use trip. So in the summary view, let's finish up updating this. We'll just call this the summary. Call that the trip summary, and then this button can say finish. The button in the budget view should not say finish anymore. It should just say continue. All right, so load that again. If we hit continue on the date view, it brings us to the budget view. Continue on that, which actually we can get rid of all this text here and just hit continue on that. And then it'll bring us to that summary view. All right, so this trip view is what we're going to be working on right now. So the thing we want to be updating here is the budget. So our trip, if you remember, we have our trip model. Our trip has a budget on it. So we're going to be updating that budget value on this trip object, which is what gets saved to Firebase later. Sorry, not in the summary view. This will be in the budget view. We're going to be using that trip object. Down here in the body of our scaffold, above the raised button, we're going to add some text. All right, and then below that, we're going to add the actual text field here. And then this is going to need a controller actually, so we can set that as being the budget controller. And let's go ahead and create this budget controller up above, which can be right inside the build method here. We can do a text editing controller. And then we're actually going to set the text of that to be the text of our our object that we're passing in, our trip object, if we have a value in that already, which this is just so if we go back a page and come back to this page, it'll save our data for that trip budget. So if it equals null, which means if it's empty, we're just going to set it to nothing. If not, then we're going to set it to that trip of budget. We're going to set it to that budget value on the trip and just make sure it is a string. String is a fixed int because we want this to, since it will be a number, we'll just round it up to the nearest dollar. Cool, so we have our controller now. After that, we can add the max lines, which is just going to be 1. We only want this to be a 1-line field. Then we can add some decoration to this text field, which we're going to need to use the input decoration widget here. And then inside of that, we're actually going to do a prefix icon, and that's going to be the dollar sign. So use icon of icons dot, I believe it's money. Attach money is what we want. Cool. And then other than the icon, we're going to actually also add a text helper, which is called helper text. And then that's just going to say the daily estimated budget. All right. And just a few last things. We're going to actually change the keyboard type here. So we can set keyboard type to be the text input type of, number with options. And then we're going to want decimal to be false, because for now we're going to only let you do a budget to the nearest dollar. And then let's go ahead and add the input formatters. And the input formatters here are going to tell us what kind of keyboard to actually use. So it's whitelisting text input formatter, and it's going to be digits only. All right, and then this one we can actually autofocus true, so that text field is selected when we first get to it. All right, and actually this whitelisting text input formatter requires an input of the Flutter services. So go ahead and add that package in, and you should see that error goes away. We just need a comma here. And if we save this, our hot reload should show it, which looks all right, but let's go ahead and add a little bit of padding on the right and left of that. So if we wrap this text field here in some padding of, actually, let's go ahead with 30. And then if we save that, kind of centers it up a bit more, which looks much better. All right, so now we just want to make sure that that value is going to get saved to our trip object. So if we go down into the button here, there's just one piece we need to add. The on pressed right now is doing this. It's actually doing this async call to firebase, which is not exactly what we want. Again, that should have been, this is left over from when this was the summary page. Okay, so here we're going to set the trip budget, and we're going to really make that equal to the budget controller text. So the thing here is that this text is going to be a string value, so we actually need to go ahead and convert it to an integer, because we're storing this trip budget as an integer both in Firebase and on our trip model. If you look here, our budget is a double, so we're going to need to actually convert it to a double then. So go ahead and wrap this in parentheses, and we're going to say if this equals an empty string, which would mean that nothing was entered, we're going to set the trip budget then to 0. If not, then we're going to, and this is just, again, the shorthand for an if-else statement, we're going to double parse, which is actually double, double, and then parse it as, we're going to parse this string to a double is what this is really going to do. So text there. All right, that looks good. Now, this just needs actually a semicolon at the end. If we create a new trip, which this trip is for Austin, if we continue and hit 500 and finish that, we'll write a new trip with 500, and you can see it's already populating right here. It's the only one with an actual value, and that's because now we're setting a value. So good, this is definitely working. All right, so now we're gonna add this button down here for build budget, and what we're going to want that to do is bring up all of these fields. So instead of just having the one field, we're going to break down the budget by these different categories. So we're going to do this with a stateful widget. So the first thing we can do here is just convert our stateless widget to a stateful widget, and then now that we have that, we can actually go ahead and add we can add two types of states for this page here. So let's do an enum here. We're going to call them budget types. Actually, just budget type, singular. And we're going to have two types. We're going to do a simple budget, which is the one we kind of already have done, and then we're going to do a complex. All right, and actually simple. Yeah, simple budget and a complex budget. All right, cool. So now we have those budget types. Let's go ahead and set the budget type as soon as we go into we actually don't need this firebase instance anymore here, so we can remove that. Let's go ahead and set a new variable here, and this is going to be the budget state. And then that is going to equal the budget type of simple. So we're going to default it to the simple type. Now we need to use this budget state. So let's go ahead and create actually let's create a text field, but let's do it in a function. So let's do a function that just returns a text field, and let's call it the set budget fields. For now, we're just going to do the one text field, but eventually this will be built into including all of these. Is going to be including all of these various text fields and inputs. But just to make sure our stateful widget is working correctly, let's just keep it simple for now. So we need a text variable here, and we're just going to call that text for now. Let's call it the title, and title text, I suppose. And now we're just going to do a simple if statement that says if the budget state is equal to the budget type of simple, then that means we want to set this budget text, which is the title text, to equal. Actually, we want to set that title text to equal a text widget of. For now, we'll just call it the simple budget. And that's good. And then we could use else here, but we're going to use else if, and we're going to explicitly say if the budget type, or if the budget state is equal to the budget type of complex, then we're going to use the text, or then we're going to set the text title to equal a text field or a text widget, and it will say a complex budget. And then I guess finally we can add an else here and set this title basically to nothing. This actually should not be the case because it should be one of the two, but this is kind of like an error, I guess. If there is a problem with it, it'll just default to not having a title. Let's return that title text. And now let's just use this set budget fields and call it in the body here, right above the text widget that we have there already. So you can see it is saying simple budget, which is what we would expect because we're defaulting to a simple budget. Now let's go ahead and add another button down here so we can have a button that will switch the state of this. So first things first, let's go ahead and actually change this raise button to a flat button. And let's go ahead and add some style to it. Just go ahead, or just add style here, and we're going to do some text style. And just right now we'll change the font size to be 25 and the color to be blue. All right, that looks good. Now, after the flat button, let's go ahead and add a divider with text. So again, we're going to need to input that, or we're going to need to import that package, the divider with text. All right, we can remove these other two packages, the Cloud Firestore and the provider widget. We don't need those anymore because we're not actually going to be submitting to Firebase on this page. So now that we have the divider with text, we can add that as a widget right here. And let's just give the divider text of lowercase or. And now let's go ahead and add another flat button. Actually, we can copy this one up here, be a bit quicker. And the on pressed is no longer going to be asynchronous, and we can just remove everything from the inside of that. But we should have, if you save it, two buttons there. We don't really want this to say continue. We want this to be set programmatically based on the state of our page here. And actually, let's go ahead and change this variable to be budget state with a capital S and update that here and here. So let's actually just add a new variable here, and this can be the, we can call this the switch button text. And to begin with, it will just say build budget. All right, and now we want to actually change this. If the state is our simple state, we'll actually set it to build budget, and then if it isn't our simple state, we're going to set it to be we'll set it to be a simple budget instead of build budget. So that'll let us go back to being just this page view here. And if we don't have one, we'll just not set it, which means the button it would look like the button is not there. Cool. So I'm actually thinking maybe we want to put in the else. I'm thinking maybe we will change this else to just be one of them, since there's only two for now. Yeah, let's just go ahead and get rid of that and do the else here for complex. We'll just assume. Let's add a comment. All right. All right, so here we're going to just set the budget state to be the opposite of what it currently is. So if the budget state is equal to the budget type of simple, then we're going to set it to the budget type of complex, and then if not, we'll set it to the budget type of simple, because that means it was complex already. Cool. If you save this, right, and if you hot reload, you can see if we hit the button here, it will change both the text and the button text, and we can keep triggering back and forth. All right, so when we click the build budget button here, we actually want 4 fields to pop up. One for transportation, food, lodging, and entertainment. And then we want to calculate the total price based on those 4 fields total. So that means we're going to actually be creating 4 new text fields in addition to the one that we already have. So to make this a little bit easier and cleaner, let's actually extract this. All right, so if we grab from the padding down and copy all this, we can go ahead and create a new widget, and this is going to be down below the down below everything except that last semicolon. So we'll keep it inside of this stateless class, or yeah, this stateful class, sorry. So this will be a widget, and it's going to be, we'll call it generate the text fields. Actually just generate one text field, and go ahead and paste that whole widget down here. And we're just going to call this the text field. So it's a bit more than the text field. It has the padding and all, but it is what we will want to return. So we can return the text field, which is this block now. And so you'll see there's an error here with the controller. Let's go ahead and just pass the controller as a parameter. And we'll just use controller here. And then also you'll notice that this text here is very specific to this text field that we're replacing, so it's not really reusable. So let's also pass in some helper text. And then just go ahead and replace this with helper text. All right, now we can call the generate text field up here where we removed it. And we'll give it the budget controller and our text, which I copied earlier, our helper text, daily estimated budget. Cool, so that should run, everything should look the same. But now this will allow us to reuse this generate text widget and use it to generate the other 4 text boxes with only giving it a controller and the helper text. All right, so we're generating this text field right inside of the scaffold's body, which is not actually going to work for us because we want this to be changed when we hit that simple, when we toggle the button. So we're going to need to move this out into the, we can use this set budget fields button, which we already have and we're already calling. And we can actually just move both the text and the generate text fields into the set budget fields method up here, and we'll do it right underneath. So this isn't going to work. This isn't going to quite work because these need to be in a list view, because down here our widget is taking a list, right? So we're just giving it, we need to turn, instead of returning text, we need to return a list of widgets. So go ahead and change this to be a list of widgets, a list of type widget, and then instead of the title text, we're going to actually just create a new list here, and that's also going to be of widgets. And we'll just call it fields and start that out as an empty list. So in this, we're going to add these fields to this list. All right, so when it's a simple budget state, we're actually just going to return 2 fields to this list. So we can just use fields.add. And we're going to add the text of enter the trip budget. And we're also going to add the generate that text field for the budget controller. And these will now have semicolons at the end. And we're actually going to remove this title text. And you'll notice the budget controller is throwing an error, and that's because this widget does not have access to it. So we'll just pass that in. All right, so that should work for our simple state. Now we can actually just remove this one as well. And for our complex state, let's just only have the button text right there. And here we're going to return the fields. So if we save that, okay, and then when we call our set budget fields, we just need to also give it that budget controller. All right, so this is throwing an error, and that is because this itself is returning a list, and we're putting this list inside of this already built list right here. So really what we're going to do is only call this as the child element, so we can remove that part. But this is going to now cause a problem because we have all of our other buttons that we want to add to the bottom of that. So we're going to actually just pull these buttons out. So remove those and actually remove that end bracket there. And those buttons we can add right into here. So after we've added the fields that we want to add for either our simple or our complex, we can add the fields for our buttons. And pretty much all we need to do is add these fields. So it'll be the fields.add is what we're going to use, and just wrap each one of these in that. And if you want, you can clean this up even more by putting all the buttons, for instance, in its own method, and then calling that method here. But this is a bit quicker, so all right, that should be good. Now if we go back down to our build method, it's much cleaner here. It's just calling that one list builder. Great. Now, one quick thing we can add right now is actually to wrap this in a scroll view, and that's because when the keyboard comes up, this is going to get blocked. So simply add around the center here, just add a widget, just wrap it with a new widget, and then use the single child scroll view, and that should save us. But everything gets pushed up to the top, which for right now I think we're just gonna leave, and we're gonna come back and restyle everything once it's working. But all right, so now this page looks good. Let's go ahead and get those four fields set up here. So this is also going to happen again right in this set budget fields, and we're going to use right under here. We're just going to start adding some fields, very similar to how we are adding them for the one above. So we can add a title, enter how much you want to spend in each area. All right, and now we just need to create those new text fields. So to create the text field, again, we can use this new function that we just created, this generate text fields, but we need a controller for each one. So let's go ahead and create 4 new controllers. All right, so we're defining our text editing controller right now in our build method. So let's go ahead and take that and move it up to our initializer. So copy that as well as where we're setting the text, and just remove that from our build method altogether. Now move that all the way up to our right under where we have our state here. After these 2 variables, we can just paste this here. Let's go ahead and actually delete where we're setting the text on it and just set our text editing controller. Now our budget controller is defined about here, and we're just going to pretty much define 4 new controllers as well. All right, and now we can use these to build the 4 text fields in our complex budget type. So basically we could copy this 4 times as well. And I'll just go ahead and fill this in real quick. All right, and those are set. So now if we hot reload, you'll see we have the 4 text controllers now. So another thing we might want to see is the total for these. So let's go ahead and add another field down below, and this one is going to be just text. And this we're going to actually we're going to need a new variable that we can use that will have state on it, and that's going to be the budget total. So let's go ahead and we'll set it with the $sign here, and then we're going to call this new variable, which we haven't yet created, which we're going to call the budget total. All right, so let's create this variable real quick, and we'll do that up at the top. and we're going to just set it equal to 0. All right, so great, we have our budget total. So when we start entering text in the app, we want this budget total to be updated with the sum of all 4 of these fields. So to do that, we need to actually have a listener on each of these text fields and then call a function every time that the text field changes. So first, let's create the listeners. So right under defining the controllers, we're going to actually initialize. We're going to initialize them with listeners. So this will be we're going to add a listener for each one of these 4 controllers. So it's going to look like this. We're going to add a listener, and then we need to give it a function to call when the listener is used. So let's go ahead and we're going to create a function. Let's call it set the total budget. All right, now let's quickly create this function. So all we want this function to do is sum up all the text fields. So let's define a variable here, total. And now we can see if we have a value in our text controller, we can add it to this total. If not, we'll just add 0. So I'll do that quickly as well because it's repetitive. All right, so as you can see, if we have a value in any of these controllers, we're just going to add that integer value from the text field. And now we're going to actually set the state of that budget total variable that we created, and we're going to set that equal to this total. So now that we have this listener, anytime we update this value, it's going to trigger that set total budget and update this value. So you'll notice right now if we add it in any of the other fields, nothing's going to show, so we just need to add the other 3 of these. All right, now that we have that, you can see if we add values in any of these, they will be summed up down below. Now we want to also use this budget total when we are saving our total budget. So we want to set our total budget to be not the budget controller text, but we just want to set our trip budget to be that budget total. And that's going to need to be converted to a double. So that will work like that. After setting that budget total down here, we actually also want to set the budget total on our initial simple budget. To do that, we can, in the build of our budget, or in the build here right above our scaffold, let's just add one quick line, which is going to be the budget. We're going to be looking at the budget controller text value, and we're going to want to set that equal to, if we have the budget controller, if the budget controller text is 0, we're going to show empty. If not, then we're going to actually just set it to that budget total, and this will be as a string, because that budget total is an integer value. All right, now if we save that, you'll see 62 comes up here, and that's because that is the value of these 3 numbers. All right, great. Last thing is, when we're saving this to Firebase, we actually do want to save these 4 values. So right now, if we submit this, we will get our 62 value saved, but we won't have any way of tracking these 4 different values. So to do that, we're going to actually have to update our trip model. And if we look at our trip model here, we're going to add a new field. So after the budget, let's go ahead and add a new field. And this is going to be actually a map, because we're going to store these as an array. So all 4 fields here will be stored as basically be stored as one array with 4 elements. So we'll call these the budget types. All right, the budget types. Now we're going to add that here. And we're going to also need to use, we're going to add it into our JSON here. So that way we can upload it. All right, now that should be good. We're going to have a few errors in our app now, mainly in this navigation view. We can just go ahead and add another null amount here. Because remember, this is what's pushing, this is like creating the empty version of a trip. And there's definitely a better way to do that, but we're not going to go over that right now. All right, find the flat button field. And this again is in the set budget fields. Find the flat button where we're actually making that call to the next view, which is this continue button. So when we hit this continue button, we're going to not only send it this trip budget, but we're also going to send it the budget types. All right, again, this, we created it as a map. So it has the map has a key value pair here. So we can give it, really, we can give it any key and value we want. So let's give it the keys that match up with these 4 fields here. So transportation will be our first one, and that's going to be the key. And then the value is going to be our transportation controller. Our value is going to be the transportation controller text. And this is going to need to be actually a double because we want to store this as a number, not as a string. So we can just double parse this and take that double parse the transportation controller dot text. Now, if this is 0, if the text is null right here, it'll actually just get stored as null. So we should be fine leaving it like this. If you want it to actually be stored as 0, you could do it like this. You would simply use the transportation controller of text, and you would check if it equals nothing. So if it equals nothing, then you're going to save to Firebase a value of 0. If not, then you'll save that actual value. Since I already wrote that out, I guess we'll just store 0 values instead of null. You're going to put a comma here, and I'll just add the other 4. All right, now that these are there, rerun the app. And let's go ahead and test this one last time. So if we have our trip and we build the budget, we can have 200 here, 100 here, 50, and we'll leave that one 0. So we have 350 here. Our total is showing there. Again, you can see the simple budget is here, 350. Go back to building the budget, everything is still there. If we continue, and then if we go back, all of our numbers are still there. Continue again, and if we hit finish, we're going to see that it will update into Firebase. Right there is our 350. That's the one that we just created. All right, and let me show you quickly what that looks like in Firebase. All right, this right here I already found is the one that we just created. You can see the total is 350, and then we have our budget types here, and they are an array or a map. And the map is actually a bit different than the array. The map lets you have the key value pairs. I know I was saying array earlier, but it is like a hash in other languages, it's sometimes called, but this is a dictionary as well. They're all mean the same thing, just a key value pair, which this is great because our budget types, now we can access, budget type of entertainment and see it's 0, budget type of food, is 100. So, all right, great. So now we can create a budget and either do it by entering a full amount, or we can break it down in the various pieces of the budget. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. That's going to be it. Ciao for now.